Great. Thank you for joining us today. And as we get started, and given the topic is the power of the diaspora, before we even get into the details of it, I just want to understand from you, given both of you have spent significant time in both parts of the world, in US and in India, how have you seen the impact of the diaspora community here play out in India, and both in terms of the positives and negatives? Asha Ji, if you
Okay, so listen, the diaspora is, one way of putting it is that we are, first of all, we are 5 million strong. Indian diaspora is massive in the US now. It's also it's the highest income diaspora. So as far as the US system goes, I think we have been hugely beneficial to this, our second motherland, which has given us so much, and we are contributing back in terms of, we are 2% of the population, but we are 6% US taxes now. So the Indian diaspora is doing extremely well in the US. What is its impact in the US? It's massive especially in two fields. One is in IT, in technology, and as you know, in Silicon Valley. We are a huge influence here in terms of innovation. As some of you might know, my late husband, Rajiv Motwani, who was a professor at Stanford University, was instrumental in creating the Google algorithms and in creation of Google as a company. So there are people like Rajiv who have been, who have been very instrumental in some disruptive, innovations, including somebody like Abhay Bhushan, who actually created file transfer protocol, because of which today we have email. So we have, even innovation-wise, we have phenomenal impact as a diaspora in the US. In India, does the Indian American diaspora have an impact in India? Of course, there's a huge, there's $125 billion that we send back to our country, which is growing. People are expecting it to be 135 billion next year. So the remittance economy in India is growing fast because of the Indian diaspora outside. The US diaspora is particularly strong in IT and in medicine and academia. These are the three areas where we have massive impact.
Thanks. I think to build up what Asha said, if you are to look at diaspora from a quantitative standpoint and also the nuances of what constitutes and what represents the diaspora and what has been their journey.
So just move the.
Can I?
Yeah, just. Yeah.
I don't think I'm audible. It's not working.
Can you please help?
I can. Yeah, I think it's working now. Yeah. So if you look at it globally and not just restricted to the US, I think India has by far had the largest number of immigrants outside of India. I think almost out of 280 million diaspora globally, almost 20 million come from India. And India has been the number one in diaspora since 2010. But with numbers are what they are, I think what is interesting about the Indian diaspora is they are so widespread, right? All the way from Africa to the US to Europe to Middle East. And if you look at Middle East kind of countries and Africa, I think the diaspora primarily is in hospitality, construction, and small businesses. If you come to the US, the diaspora is largely around, as Asha said, around tech and medicine and so on and so forth. Very specifically to the US, 1.5% of population, but contributes almost 7% of the taxes. And also, if you look at the way the diaspora has been expanding, initially it started off as an expansion through labor, and last 30-40 years it has expanded through influx of a lot of students and education. Yeah, so the quality of the diaspora globally has also changed quite a bit. And while Asha did cover about the 3-4 broad aspects of how the diaspora is impacting, one clearly is in terms of revenue, which is not only helping in foreign exchange of India, but it's also helping many times put food on the table, particularly the workers who are going to Dubai and Middle East and other places, are able to put food on the table for their families. Particularly many workers from Kerala and Gujarat and all who have migrated to Middle East are able to do that. Is this working?
No.
This is not working. Hello. Hello.
It's
Yeah, it's working. No, broadly, also the Indian diaspora is known to be broadly as law-abiding citizens, right? They are more giving than in taking. Uh, they are rooting for their community. A few years ago, there was no unity in the diaspora. But if you really look at the last 8 to 10 years, a lot of forums have come up, including Indiaspora and many others who are bringing unity in diaspora. And if you look at the number of policymakers and lawmakers that India now has across the globe, including almost, I think, 5 people in the Congress, almost 50 people in the legislatures in the US, and almost about a dozen prime ministers and presidents of Indian origin worldwide. I think, and not to mention the number of CEOs that we have in the Fortune 500, all of this is collectively creating a lot of this soft power. Is helping in international relations. It is helping in India having its say. When China and Russia come to the table, the Indian diaspora has been able to drive a lot of decisions with the White House of late. Yeah, so I think while it is very hard in some sense to quantify the impact of the diaspora, I would say, because in some ways, all the skills that they develop in their home country, right? It's the host country which ends up benefiting, right? So many a times, a lot of people in India say that, oh, people study in IITs and then they move to the US. All the expenses of nurturing that individual happen in India, but it's the US that's taking the advantage. But you also have to look at the counter side of the benefits that India is seeing. It's not an easy answer, but then you have to look at the cost versus benefit. There's no real data available of the benefit of India's from that standpoint.
Just Harshul, taking you back on the tough question that you just brought up. I think how there's been a change in the sense that in the 1990s, when people from India came, they came in with the mindset that we want to look for better opportunities here in terms of jobs, and they came here with the mindset that they want to settle down. Versus today, I think me and like a lot of peers of mine who are coming from India, who've grown up there, and we're coming here to get a better education or look at good opportunities. I think there is the tension is a lot more in terms of, is this a sort of brain drain that we are contributing to by coming here, versus when we know that we can develop the skill sets that we do here, but go back and help contribute to make India better by going back? Or should we instead stay here and help in other ways, like you just said, in how the diaspora impacts? So I think that tension has grown a lot more since the 1990s, I think, now, given that even there's a lot more opportunities in India as well. How do you see that playing out over time? And if you have any advice in terms of, especially for people that are thinking about this, that there are some issues, yes, that people don't want to go back to India for, but what do you think that if India develops these things, then more people would be willing to go back, and that brain drain as a concept would not be as big a deal?
You want me to go first?
Sure. If you go first.
So, working in Tech Mahindra, we hire on an average 800 people every week. So we are 150,000 people company. Almost of that, 25,000 people are based globally. There was a time in our journey when we had our associates dying to come to the US or go to the Europe. That's no longer the case. And it's because of two reasons, right? One is very clearly that there are a lot more opportunities in India, particularly if you look at the last 10 years, particularly with the way startup ecosystem has come up, the way innovation, ease of innovation and the innovation index, India's ranking in the innovation index has come up. The way India is able to retain talent with better infrastructure and better quality of life. That's just one aspect of why many people are that lure of going overseas is slowly waning. But at the same time, also, I think somebody asked that question, right, that the green cards are taking forever, right? So if somebody has to look at a long-term career in the US, and if they are not able to get a permanent residency, right, that's a massive deterrent for somebody to come here. And I think many people are now actually wanting to go to Europe or Canada or other places where getting a permanent residency is much easier. So definitely the Congress needs to look at that to for US to continue to attract immigrants, because this is what the country has been made up of. But I think, yeah, so it's While at the same time, India is going to take maybe a decade or maybe 2, 3 more decades for its quality of life to come up to the standard, for it to be a developed world, developed country in the world. It says by 2047, there is this slogan of Viksit Bharat. So till the time that happens, I'm sure US will still continue to be a destination that people want to come to.
I think in terms of the tension that you mentioned, for students like yourself and many in the room, there is going to be, there's going to be a little bit of dilemma. By the way, those of us who came early in 1980s also had the same dilemma, right? We wanted to go back to India at some point, but we ended up staying here for a little bit, thinking we'll go back at some point. And there is always a pull factor from India because we love the place also. We've grown up, those of us who've grown up there, that's a strong pull. I actually think that going forward, those of you who can manage to stay here and work for a little bit, there's nothing wrong with that. I think you should stay and strive to get citizenship here. I think it's always a good idea, and work towards whether you stay here or in India. The brain drain question is not there. I actually don't think at all that that Indians coming here and contributing to American companies or American culture here are in any way it's taking them away from India. That's not the case. I think we actually end up bringing a lot of value back home in India to our friends, family, circles, and so there's a positive impact of our being here. And those of you who are in the student community who are thinking about whether to stay here or go back, I think if you find an option here that's exciting for you, then stay here. I mean, you are one flight away, right? Actually, and especially now that the world is becoming so global and so virtual, it's possible to have your cake and eat it too, right? So you stay here, but you go back to India and you work with some similar company in India. A lot of companies I know in the Bay Area have back offices in India or even front offices now in India, and a lot of R&D happening in India. So staying here, you are still contributing to your company, but you're also having a chance to go back and forth to India. So I think it works out.
Okay, I think that's an interesting perspective to hear, that it's not really a brain drain issue as much as we think of it to be. And I think, Asha ji, your question, this is more, I think, given that you worked significantly with VCs and entrepreneurs in US and in India, and especially in the social impact space, where when we think about, we want to help contribute towards India's growth story, I think a lot of it is also that can we do some impactful work there. But do you see any trends which in the US, specifically in sectors like healthcare, education, or sustainability, or which you think are transferable that we can take to India and implement there, and especially when we're talking about an impact focus lens?
So first of all, India has a lot of money now. Okay, there's a lot of funding, a lot of money. India is a very wealthy country, actually. I mean, we may not see as much because if you look at a larger picture, but those of us who are coming from metros and urban areas, there is a lot of. I've been trying to do some, little bit of sort of impact work in India. Honestly, a lot of people tell me that funding is not an issue. What they tell me is that we need you to strengthen India in America. In fact, I was just talking to an NGO yesterday, large NGO in India, and they said, we don't need them. We don't need that kind of, we don't need the diaspora to come back and fund hospital, a temple. They said, what to ho raha hai? What they're saying is that, can you guys strengthen India over there, make sure the Indians have a stronger voice in the US, so that we are the engines, and we are becoming the engines of US-India partnership. And we are strengthening the image of India in the US. We are strengthening the voice of India in the US. You saw how Sri Thanedar has already started some extremely important initiatives in the US Congress. We must have influence in Washington, D.C., in the Congress. We should be, as a diaspora, we should be organized enough to say, what are the various policies towards India that we want impact on? It's not just on H-1B visas, but it's also on defense. It's on defense collaborations, Indian security in the Indo-Pacific. US is investing heavily in all things India right now. In fact, India might be a bit slow. The Indian government might be a bit slow in building that kind of trust with the US. so that we become America's bulwark against any threats in the Indo-Pacific. So these are all things that we need to think out of the box now. I mean, the good old days when we used to think, let me do something in India which will be helpful. I think India is strong. It's rising. It understands. It's a newly confident country, and it's a very young country, unlike America, which is aging fast. I think, median age here is probably 40, 45 now. India, it is still 28, so it's a very young, very aspiring country. And so our being here, I think, is more valuable than, so there's no brain drain, none.
Interesting that you brought up the point that it's also about the perception that we build of India here that can help in long-term partnerships. I think, Harshul, I've got a question for you on this line, that given that now technology is the new upcoming thing and India is turning out to be a big innovation hub in the space. Previously, I think US, not just US, but mostly companies looked at India as a way to just outsource back-end tech jobs. But now, given the innovation in the space, do you see the image of India changing in terms of how we collaborate and how companies here work with them?
I think that's a great question. India today, I believe, is at an inflection point where it has an opportunity to be rebranded from being known as the outsourcing destination of the world to being one of the core innovation engines of the world. And the reason I say that is because if you just look at pure play IT technology services companies, right, which has been the mainstay of Indian IT, they largely did back office work all this while, right? While innovation happened in the Valley, all the back office work happened in India, but that's no longer the case. Even services companies have dramatically gone up the curve. Today, if you look at companies like Tech Mahindra, we find our way at the board level, right? We have a seat at the board with many companies where we are advising them on their future roadmaps and cloud and digital, so on and so forth. If you look at the startup ecosystem in India, which is fundamentally driven by innovation, and where it is today. 7-8 years ago, there were hardly 2 unicorns in India. Today there are well over 100 unicorns in India. And the good news is they are not just local B2C startups. There are a lot of these startups are B2B product companies which have now started catering to the world market, right? So the world is recognizing the value of Indian products. And I won't talk about innovation just in tech. If you just look at overall in Make in India, right, some of the Indian products are now started gaining recognition worldwide, all the way from footwear to electric vehicles. So for example, electric Mahindra vehicles generally in India outpace any foreign vehicle in India. Yeah, and if you look at the quality of the XUV 700 or the Scorpio N, which many of you may have gone to India and driven in those cars, they're absolutely world class. So whether it is automobiles to footwear, I think a lot of Indian products have started gaining prominence. And I think the time is right for more elaborate collaboration. It has already started, not just between governments, but between private sector companies. The VCs have already started investing big time in India. All the top Silicon Valley VCs are in India now in some shape or form, right? Most major Fortune 1000 corporations have their captive centers in India. Where they don't just do back-end services, core innovation. GE does core innovation. IBM does its core innovation sitting in Bangalore. Right? So I think gone are those days when India was recognized only as an outsourcing destination. The next 10 years, which is known as the decade in India, the decade for technology in India, is really going to define how India finds its place on the world map when it comes to innovation. And the grand first step has, in my view, been the DPI, the public infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure that has been created, right? The India stack that has been created, that the whole world is looking up to, right? The impact that DPI has on the whole world. It's an innovation, I would say, of the century. Yeah. So I think a lot of new companies can be built and are being built just on the back of DPI. A lot of fintech companies have come out, and I believe they are just getting started.
I think that's a great positive noted this. I think before we open it up for questions to the audience, I just have one last question in terms of how we end this. But I think staying at Stanford, most of us have this. Most of us will end up at some level linking to the Silicon Valley here, whether it's through VCs or entrepreneurship here. And for the people here, what advice would you have that if you are in this space in the Silicon Valley or Bay Area for a while, how do you think we can leverage opportunities here to? I know one is the partnerships and the image that you talked about India broadly, but given that we will be working more in this space here, what we can actually do to impact, create opportunities or impact in India?
Okay. So first of all, if you're at Stanford, I mean, you already have, massive network of Indians in the Silicon Valley. You also have TIE here. I would strongly recommend being at TIECon, which happens on May 1st and 2nd in Santa Clara. You should be there because that's when you'll meet everybody, right? Other startups that you might find interesting, people who might be looking for co-founders. There are lots of venture capitalists and angels there. There is a TIE 50 competition where you will meet 50 top startups that TIE has picked. So please be there on May 1st and 2nd in Santa Clara. I think it's just TIE.org and register if you can. But more importantly, I think, being here at Stanford and, looking at all the options, the first thing you must do is to make sure that you are, going out and really, pushing yourself in sort of being in front of people that you want, that are relevant for you. Whether it's VCs, whether it's angels, don't ever be afraid of, rejection or things like, somebody, I remember when Rajiv and I did our first startup, we probably had at least 15 no's before we got funded. So that, it's just part of the learning. And what was the question again?
The question is more that if a lot of us do end up working in the space here, how can we leverage the opportunities that we have here to create impact in India ultimately?
Yeah, that I think. Listen, whether you work at a Google or you work at a startup, right? You are going to go back and forth, right, to India. It's going to, like, I'll give you an example of my niece here, who's Karishma, who's sitting. Karishma, raise your hand. She came from India. She studied here, and like all of you, she had a very similar sort of an experience of being here, being torn about thinking, should I go back and work in India, not work in? She joined a startup called Health Tap, and and has risen to the product VP level and so on. But what I'm seeing is that she's going back and forth to Bangalore all the time. And, and there is so much learning that she brings to the table that she's taking back. And the team in India is learning from her. She's mentoring various students like yourselves here in the Bay Area. I think you have an opportunity. You have an unusual snapshot into the level of success that the probability of success that you'll have. So it's your whole attitude of saying, look, whether what I do here, I'm going to give back to my country. That is critical, because in any small way, I mean, whether you're helping the cook who is cooking at your home or anything, right? Just that attitude is what creates that seed of, and there is no way that any of us is going to be strictly US now. We are all, whether we like it or not, we are all having a massive impact on India. And this is the most beautiful, most exciting time to be an Indian American here.
I would add to what Asha said, in the sense that you are all, as future leaders of tomorrow, you are the top creme de la creme of the world. You have an amazing opportunity to create an impact in India and shape the future of India, irrespective of which side of the border you sit at. I believe that India needs inclusive growth. Not that it's not getting it, but it needs next 10 to 20 years, unless all stratas of the society come collectively to the fore, and not just urban India and a few select pockets. GDP will continue to grow, but is it inclusive growth? And what can this group in this room do to drive more impact at the social level? How do you drive more impact to bring the lower strata of the society in India to the fore? because with 1.4 billion people, there are still 1/3 of India which is below the poverty line and which really needs help. And unless the rural India, unless the poor of India come forward, nobody dies of hunger. Period. Um, uh, there's no point in driving a strong economy. So whatever you people in this room can do to drive more social impact and bring people to the fore from bottom strata of the society, I think that's what you should focus on.
I think we have 5 minutes to open it up to the audience if anyone has any questions for the panel. Okay, great. I think everyone's had a
No
hearty
questions?
lunch today.
Yeah.
My question is for Asha Ji. You mentioned how sort of the diaspora here has been sort of like working to sort of even influence the policy and sort of like with the visas and everything like that. I think one trend that I see among my peers who are sort of like who moved here in the last maybe like couple of years or 5 years or 6 years, we don't really know how to navigate the public life here basically, right? We don't really know how to be part of that influence essentially, right? Can you maybe speak a little bit about like how can we get involved, right?
Are you a student here?
So I was a student, now I work. Yeah.
Now you're working?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, listen, first of all, organizing at a student level is critical. Okay, it's important that given that you are at Stanford, it's critical that you organize on matters that are important to you. So be part of the group. Like, for example, CPEC here is this, the society with the Society for Economic and Policy Club or something. Stanford India Club. So these kind of entities, which are small communities at Stanford, are critical in shaping the narrative of who we are and where we are heading. But I think as you grow older, let's say you are interested in in a bill that is being promoted in Congress. You must plug into certain communities. There are many WhatsApp groups now, email groups. There are just thousands of groups now where you can participate as an Indian student and say, look, there'll be things like letter writing, there'll be signatures that you can get. So just volunteer small time at any of these things. And if you want, I can give you some references after the talk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.